The US President Joe Biden has welcomed the arrest warrant issued against Vladimir Putin by the International Criminal Court on Friday. Russia's president is accused of war crimes, focusing on the forced deportation of Ukrainian children to Russia. It's the first time the court has ordered the arrest of a prominent serving political leader. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has hailed the decision as historic. Moscow, though, dismissed the announcement as outrageous, saying it doesn't recognise the jurisdiction of the court. Here's the BBC's Helena Wilkinson.
It is a war that he ordered, a war that brought death and devastation, a war that sent millions fleeing for their lives. But it's one that has now left President Putin accused of war crimes by an international court and even more isolated on the world stage.
The judges have reviewed the information and evidence submitted by the prosecutor and determined that there are credible allegations against these persons for the alleged crimes.
The International Criminal Court, based in The Hague, alleges the Russian leader and another official are individually responsible for the war crime of unlawfully deporting children from Ukraine to Russia. This was the reaction from President Biden to the ICC's move.
Well, I think it's justified, but the question is, it's not recognized internationally by us either. But I think it makes a very strong point. He's clearly committed war crimes. Thank you.
In the chaos that followed the invasion, millions of people were displaced, and there have been reports of thousands of children being sent to so-called re-education camps in Russia, alleged crimes for which Ukraine's president has repeatedly demanded justice.
This is a historic decision from which historical responsibility will begin. The head of the terrorist state and another Russian official have become suspects in a war crime.
A Kremlin spokesman said the allegations were outrageous and unacceptable. The Foreign Ministry said the arrest warrant meant nothing legally.
Russia is not a party to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court and bears no obligations under it.
The man investigating the allegations against Mr Putin denied the warrants were symbolic.
There are reasonable grounds to believe that crimes within our court's jurisdiction have been committed. So those that feel that you can commit a crime in the daytime and sleep well at night should perhaps look at history.
Vladimir Putin may never be arrested or appear in court, but it's not every day that a serving head of state is accused of war crimes. And it's a signal from the international community that they'll seek justice from what's been happening in Ukraine. Helena Wilkinson, BBC News.
I spoke earlier to our correspondent in The Hague, Anna Holligan, who gave us more details about the warrant.
There are so many people talking about this being a symbolic move, but actually what stands out as being very significant is that in order to issue these arrest warrants, the ICC needs to have sufficient grounds, sufficient evidence to be able to actually point the finger at President Putin. So that's why this is so important. And a lot of people are wondering why focus on this specific crime. Those who've been watching the atrocities, the alleged atrocities being committed in Russia, in Ukraine since the start of the Russian invasion, will be familiar with attacks on hospitals, power grids, and yet this is very specific, focusing on the alleged forcible transfer of children, Ukrainian children, across the border into Russia. And one of the reasons, I spoke to Karim Khan, the prosecutor, last night, one of the reasons is because they believe they have enough evidence to bring this case to court. But of course, that's just the first part of this. And Ukraine has spoken about this issue in the past and estimated that 16,000 Ukrainian children have been taken across the border into Russia, adopted, some of them by Russian families. And when I was speaking to Karim Khan, he pointed out that Russia had recently signed a decree which made it easier for Russian families to adopt Ukrainian children. And Karim Khan has been to Ukraine 4 times since February 2022. And the last time he visited a children's home close to the front line, he was surrounded by empty cots. He said then, and he said again to me yesterday, children cannot be treated as the spoils of war.
It's a very powerful indictment in that sense, isn't it? But in terms of practicalities with this, Anna, could it actually be a bit of a spanner in the works of any prospect of a negotiation to bring the war to an end?
Possibly, although the ICC would always say that it is driven by evidence rather than any kind of political motivations. But this is a geopolitical context that we're looking at all this from within. And the other issue is, of course, Russia is not a member of the ICC. As you said, they have described this arrest warrant as outrageous. In fact, the spokesman Dmitry Peskov compared it to toilet paper. And yet, 123 countries are members of the ICC. They are now duty-bound. They're obliged to arrest President Putin if he steps foot on their territory. So it could make travel very difficult if he decided, for example, he wanted to go to Cyprus or Serbia. The other thing to bear in mind is, in a few days' time, he will be meeting Chinese President Xi Jinping. That could feel very awkward because he will now be standing shoulder to shoulder with a suspected war criminal.
Anna Holligan reporting from The Hague.